Okay, so after the last video that I made about how I study, I had a request to elaborate a little bit and explain some more about the concepts. And basically, I'm making this video for that person, and hopefully, it can help some other people as well. So, this is how I study, but part two. Let me get to the next page. So, to recap, in the last video I outlined three basics. And to recap even more, the reason that I'm making this is because I feel like I gained quite a good system over my first year of university studies that I've completed now. So before starting studying, I had no idea what I was doing. I was never good in school at all, but I decided that I wanted to be a good student and started learning it. So the three basics, always the most important: high focus, super high focus in short sessions. This allows you to save energy and allows you to retain as much of what you learn as possible. Studying directly in the morning ties into point one, because if you study directly in the morning, you have more mental power and you have more focus. The third, being active as well, ties into the first two, because you need focus and you need energy in order to be active while study. And in order to retain what you study, you need to be active with it. We will explain this. So, what should you avoid to do? Passively reading. You can read for 3 hours in a book and learn nothing. If you just sit there and passively read, being tired and bored. You feel like you're studying, you feel like you're doing something because you're spending time on your subject, but you're actually not getting anything into your mind. So I would avoid doing this. I would avoid trying to learn too much at one time. Why? Because your brain cannot process too much information. If you just learn a little bit each time, it will add up over and over again. And then also trying to learn complicated things without the basics, I would also avoid. Because if you cannot base what you're trying to learn on anything else, it's very difficult. If I'm trying to learn the intricacies of an engine, but I don't even know what a car is, says itself, not so good. Well, I got asked this exactly what is active studying. So I'm going to explain it. Basically, anytime you are using the information on your own without reading or without copying, you are being active. So let's say I read something, but then I close the book. I try to use this information with my own brain. That is an active form of studying. It can be many different forms of it. So this is something that takes effort, it takes concentration, and it takes not having any distractions while you do it. That's why it's very hard for people, and that's why you shouldn't spend a lot of time doing it. Just short sessions, because of this effort and concentration that is needed. Okay? Another point I feel like is very important: adaptation. This was something that was quite difficult for me in the beginning of my studies here in university, because I basically used the same techniques for every subject, but I quickly realized that not all subjects are the same, and you don't have to study them the same way either. So, for example, some subjects require more understanding, while other subjects require more memorization. This changes my approach. If I have to understand something more, I will spend more time reading or asking ChatGPT to explain it to me. I will process it by drawing some diagrams or writing it down in my own words, and then I will try to explain to another person. This is a very effective way when you need to understand something. But you necessarily don't need to memorize a lot. You can apply this understanding, and then you will quite quickly remember it, because if you already understand it, you can just pick it up whenever you need. But it's very different when you have to memorize something. This is when you just go for pure repetition, pure consistency and pure repetition. Just repeating a list over and over again without cheating, without looking at anything. You just repeat it to yourself every day, for example, and it will stick eventually. If you don't need to understand it, this is the way. So, for example, in my studies, we have neurology, because I study chiropractic. We have neurology. This requires some understanding in certain ways, like how the nervous system functions. It's quite complex. But with memorization, for example, in anatomy, there are a lot of words about muscles that are quite weird to learn. So you just repeat them over and over again until they stick. So I will always ask myself some questions that changes the approach to my study session. For example, how much do I already know about this? If I know something, I will not look at anything. I will just, from a blank piece of paper, write down whatever I already know, because then I can add new details to this information. But if it's a completely new topic or a completely new subject, I have to process it a bit. I cannot go active directly because I don't know anything. Then I need to learn the basics and continue from there. So ChatGPT is so good for understanding. You can literally have a conversation with it and like get examples and everything. It's a very powerful tool, but don't trust it too much, because sometimes it can actually be wrong. Like one out of 20 times, maybe. So an example of how I used adaptation this morning, actually, and so it's Sunday today, and Saturday we went out until like 4 or 5. So, and drinking. So of course on Sunday today I didn't have the best energy levels or concentration levels when I woke up. Then it's not really the best time to learn something new and something very complicated. But I picked a topic from my neurology. I just started. I saw some parts of it, and then I just repeated some things that I already know. Okay, this is these things. I just repeated them over and over again, because that doesn't really take that much effort. Now, once I repeated this, I saw that the new subject I was studying had one thing that was linked. So I just focused on learning that thing, adding it to my details that I already knew. Just one thing. It's a Sunday, I was a bit hungover, but I still learned a little bit. 30 minutes of active neurology, and you're good for the day. Because it's the consistency that matters, okay? Well, coming on to consistency. Knowledge compounds, and that's why consistency is so powerful. So I will always repeat stuff that comes up a lot in a subject. For example, the basics, always repeating the basics. When we are studying pathology now, which is the disease, the study of disease in the human body, one thing that comes up a lot is the electrolytes. So for example, sodium in the body. It comes up in many different lectures. So every time I see the word sodium, I will repeat what it does in the body. And this just strengthens this connection every single time. And in the end, it will be so automatic that I will read it. Okay, sodium, it's about this, probably about this. I can link it to new things that I'm gonna learn all the time. Repeating it, repeating the basics super much. And then you can learn stuff from there. Learning a little bit each time instead of trying to learn a lot a couple of times. Because your brain is better at handling a little bit of information than so much and trying to cram it in. Another interesting reason, so because we study neurology, we get some interesting facts about this, about how the brain works. But there is a part of the brain that's called the hippocampus. Its main job is for requiring you to store long-term memories. So it takes short-term memory and turns it into long-term memory while you sleep. And actually, when you study and when you practice studying, your hippocampus grows. So every time I do a small little study session, this part of the brain dedicated to memory formation is growing. So every time it gets easier to memorize things. So for example, now 1 year into my studies, I don't have to repeat things as many times as I had to do in the very beginning. This is because of this neurological activity in the brain. Also, every time you study, you become better at studying because you're actually practicing it. This is something that people don't think about either. If you do something a lot, you become quite good at it. So regardless of the fact that you learn a little bit each time, you're actually learning more each time because you're better at learning. These concepts are why the consistency is so powerful. And I also had the suggestion to expand on the blind mind map strategy. So this is one of the best study techniques that I've used the past year. Basically what you do is, for example, you have a subject, you know a little bit about it, a certain topic in the subject, but you need to learn more. Okay, how will you do this then? You will have a blank piece of paper. You will create a mind map of whatever you know already. Maybe I know that the human body has a brain and it has muscles. That's all I know. But I need to learn a little bit more than that. But I will have a blank piece of paper and I will repeat the fact that the human body has a brain and it has muscles. Because this strengthens my basic understanding and makes it more automatic. Then I will go to the material, the book or the lecture or ChatGPT, whatever. I will add some small details to this. Maybe the fact that the brain has neurons, nerve cells. And I add the fact that there are a couple of different types of muscles in the body. Now I have a new mind map that is more detailed than the first one. I will close the material, the blank piece of paper again, and I will write this new mind map from scratch. This way I just added new details to my understanding at once and added it from my basic understanding. Now from this second mind map I can go even more detail, all the time doing it from scratch until there is a detailed mind map with a lot of information. Another interesting thing that I think regarding, because our neurological studies as well, I was listening to a Andrew Huberman podcast. He is a neuroscientist and he was basically talking about neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the way in which your brain can remodel itself and make new connections in order to learn. Now, when you're a child, it's very interesting that it's very easy for your brain to do neuroplasticity because it's constantly learning and developing itself. So children can just learn passively. They can hear something, they can hear what their parents are doing, and they just learn. They just pick up on it. But once you're an adult and your brain has developed a bit more, there are some requirements for neuroplasticity to occur. So Huberman mentions that there is a equation that focus and adrenaline plus non-sleep deep rest equals learning, equals changes in your connections in your brain when you're an adult. So this is the recipe to learning. And if you can keep this in your mind all of the time, when you're designing your study plan, it's going to be much more effective. So focus, we know what that is. Adrenaline, you know, when your heart beats a bit faster. Adrenaline is also a chemical in your brain that it kind of acts like a light bulb. So your brain just switches on. And your nerve cells are more susceptible to changing or evolving, becoming better. This is what adrenaline does. Now, how can we increase our adrenaline in our body? For example, caffeine. That's why many people get a benefit from taking in caffeine while they study, because this opens their brain to the possibility of learning. And this is maybe also explains why it's not so good studying just before you're gonna sleep. Because just before you're gonna sleep, you get melatonin instead, which is another chemical that makes you sleepier, and you don't get adrenaline. So you don't have one of the recipes in this equation. So focus, you're super focused on what you're doing, your brain is open for new information by the adrenaline, and then after the study session, you have non-sleep deep rest. This is also another concept that I found interesting from Huberman. Non-sleep deep rest is when you're not sleeping, it says non-sleep, of course, but you are doing reflexive actions. So this means automatic things that you are very wired to do. For example, you are walking, you are running, you are training your body, you're drawing, you're listening to music. These passive activities that feel nice, and you don't have to engage your brain so much to do them. Maybe you enjoy playing an instrument as well. So you would do this short study session with focus and adrenaline, and then after this you would go do something more passive that rests your brain. Now what this does is that it makes it so these connections are able to grow. We know that when we train in the gym, we need to break down the muscles, and then after that we need to sleep in order to recover the muscles and make them get back even stronger. This is kind of the same principle. We need to make these new connections, but we need time for them to set and actually form. So this is how we retain the information. And this equals learning. So a practical example of how I would do this: short study session in the morning with very much focus and caffeine. Then I would go to training, eating, exploring the city after that. Things that don't require so much of me. At this time, my brain can handle the information that I was learning. And lastly, I also have a little bonus for anatomy students. Anyone that's studying to become a doctor or a chiropractor or physiotherapist that has anatomy. It's quite difficult for many people. But in my first year here, it was one of my most successful subjects. And just a little bonuses for that. Me and my friend developed a game a anatomy game where we have a app on the computer. It's called Essential Anatomy 5. So what this is basically a 3D model of the human body with all the muscles, all the bones, all the nerves and everything. And you can take away muscles, one each of a time. So what we would do is we would put our mouse above the muscle, for example here on this guy. We would say out loud what the muscle is called, and then we would remove it. Then I would go to the next muscle here, okay, that's the pectoralis, the chest. I would say that out loud, remove it again. I would go through the whole body, all of the muscles, until I don't remember the name again, and then I have to start over again and learn that one. At the end of this, I was able to remove basically all of the muscles in the body and name all of them. And it's quite weird names to remember. So that's just 15 minutes each day, little fun game. Get some dopamine from it. Quite nice. Also, drawing is very good for understanding anatomy and being able to visualize it. You can draw just very simple things. Super simple. A joint, for example. You just draw the bone, it articulates with another bone, and then basic. You're getting it into your mind by drawing, and it's also active. And then the good thing about anatomy is that you can always connect it to your own body. It's a subject where you can actually see what you're studying. If you're studying the brain, for example, you cannot really see that so easily. But your muscles, you can see. So you can do movements with your own body, feel it, look at it, what you have. This way the information gets more ingrained in your mind and you develop a deeper understanding. So just some extra information if you're an anatomy student. I might do a full guide as well. How to study anatomy, how to study neurology, how to study physiology. Could be quite nice, but that's it. So good evening.